You stand at the edge of a vast and frozen steppe. The wind bites your face. A creature the size of a small mountain moves in the distance. The ground shakes beneath your bare feet. The air is so cold it burns your lungs with every breath. How do you kill something that can crush you without even noticing? Your body is small. Your skin is thin. You have no claws. Your teeth are flat. You possess no natural armor. You cannot outrun this beast. You cannot overpower it. Confronting a creature that weighs 6 tons seems like an absolute death sentence. It is a woolly mammoth. Its tusks are the length of small trees. Its hide is thick and impenetrable. Its trunk can toss a grown man through the freezing air like a broken branch. Why would your ancestors even try to hunt such a monster? The answer lies in the sheer volume of calories a single mammoth provides. One successful kill changes everything. One mountain of meat means your entire family survives the brutal winter. It means you do not starve in the dark. It means your children grow strong. It provides thick fur for warmth. It provides massive bone for tools. It provides rich fat for the fire. But running up to a mammoth with a sharpened stick is a terrible idea. You would be crushed in seconds. Your bones would snap like dry twigs. Your hunt would end in absolute tragedy before it even began. So you have to use the only true advantage you possess. You use your brain. You use the landscape. You turn the earth itself into a weapon. For a very long time, the modern world pictured ancient hunters as relentless, athletic runners. You might easily imagine them chasing down prey until the exhausted animals collapsed from sheer fatigue. This strategy is called persistence hunting. It works incredibly well for a lean deer on a hot, sun-baked savanna. Your ancestors were perfectly built to run and sweat under the beating sun. But this strategy completely fails in the brutal Ice Age. It absolutely does not work for a woolly rhinoceros in the freezing cold. The freezing air rapidly drains your energy. The deep snow severely slows your bare feet. The massive animals are perfectly adapted to the bitter chill. They do not overheat. They do not tire easily. They can march through blizzards that would bury you alive. How do you stop a creature that cannot be chased down? You do not chase it. You make it come to you. You force it into a situation where its own massive weight becomes its greatest enemy. You use gravity. You use fear. You use the terrain. You invent the trap. Hunting giant animals required a fundamental, radical shift in human thinking. You had to stop reacting to the animal in front of you. You had to start predicting its future movements. This is the exact moment biological engineering was born. You look at a deep valley. You see a deadly trap. You look at a steep cliff. You see a massive weapon. You look at a narrow ravine. You see a perfect choke point. This massive cognitive leap changed the entire course of human history forever. When did this begin? The archaeological evidence takes you incredibly deep into the frozen Ice Age. You must travel back hundreds of thousands of years to see the first great traps. You arrive at a site known today as La Côte de Saint-Brelade. It is a rocky, jagged headland located on the island of Jersey in the English Channel. Today, the modern sea crashes violently against the steep cliffs. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, the global sea levels were drastically lower. The English Channel did not even exist. This area was a vast, freezing grassy plain connecting directly to mainland Europe. Neanderthals lived here for generations. They faced incredibly harsh, unforgiving conditions. They relied entirely on giant game to survive the endless winters. Archaeologists digging carefully at the base of these massive cliffs found something astonishing. They uncovered massive, dense piles of mammoth and woolly rhinoceros bones. These heavy bones were layered thick and deep in the dark dirt. They were deliberately sorted. They were purposefully smashed. Dr. Becky Scott is an archaeologist who spent years closely analyzing the specific landscape around La Côte de Saint-Brelade. Her detailed, painstaking research reveals a brilliant and terrifying survival strategy. The Neanderthals were absolutely not simply chasing these giant animals around the open plains hoping for a lucky strike. That would be certain suicide. They were highly organized. They understood the local topography perfectly. They knew every single rock. They knew every single slope. They knew how the wind moved through the ravines. They used fire and intense noise to drive entire herds of mammoths toward the rocky dead ends of the headland. Imagine the extreme coordination required to execute this plan. You hold a burning torch in the twilight. You scream at the top of your lungs. You and your entire tribe form a terrifying, moving wall of fire and sound. The giant animals are instantly panicked. They are huge and incredibly difficult to maneuver quickly. Their vision is limited by the smoke and the dark. They run blindly from the fire. They stampede heavily toward the absolute edge. The Neanderthals actively forced them off the sheer cliffs. Gravity did the violent killing. The terrifying, plunging fall would instantly kill or severely injure the massive beasts. The very ground would shake as heavy flesh and thick bone hit the jagged rocks far below. The smart hunters would then safely navigate down to the bottom of the bloodied ravine. They would methodically butcher the fallen animals in absolute safety. This was not a lucky, isolated accident. This was a highly calculated, repeated behavior that spanned tens of thousands of years. Generations upon generations of Neanderthals returned to this exact same spot. They passed down the secret knowledge of the trap. You begin to realize that ancient humans were not just merely surviving in the wild. They were actively shaping their environment to completely control the absolute most dangerous creatures on Earth. They were weaponizing the landscape itself. They were turning the planet into a tool. But natural, perfectly shaped cliffs are not always available. What do you do when the surrounding land is relatively flat? The vast, endless steppes do not always offer deep ravines or high drops. You have to build the trap yourself. You have to understand animal psychology even deeper. You travel across the continent to modern-day Poland. There is an incredible archaeological site here located near Spedzista Street in Krakow. It dates back roughly 25,000 years. This is the absolute, freezing heart of the last major ice age. The landscape is a freezing, brutal, treeless tundra. The frozen ground is hard and incredibly unforgiving. The biting wind never stops howling across the flat plains. Here, dedicated researchers found the remains of over 100 mammoths concentrated in a very small, specific area. Piotr Wajdal is a paleontologist who meticulously studied these incredibly dense bone accumulations. His groundbreaking, detailed findings challenge everything you thought you knew about ancient human hunting. The massive mammoth bones were absolutely not scattered randomly across the open plain. They were not dragged there by scavenging wolves. They were piled and stacked in ways that strongly suggest deliberate, calculated architectural construction. Wajdal and his dedicated colleagues theorized that ancient humans were actively building massive bone corrals. They were using the massive ribs, heavy jaws, and long tusks of previously killed mammoths to build massive, impenetrable fences. Imagine the sheer, agonizing physical effort required to build a massive wall entirely out of mammoth bones. It is back-breaking, brutal labor. The heavy bones weigh hundreds of pounds each. The dirt ground is frozen solid like concrete. Your hands are numb from the bitter cold. Why go through all that intense, exhausting trouble? Because a physical barrier fundamentally changes the entire rules of the survival game. You actively funnel the frightened herd. You create an artificial, narrow choke point in an otherwise completely open plain. The massive animals are pushed into a muddy ravine or a dead-end corral. This terrifying corral is built entirely from the decaying bones of their own ancestors. The psychological terror of the trap is immense. Once trapped tightly in the narrow space, the giant mammoths absolutely cannot turn around. They are wedged tightly together. They cannot build any speed to charge. Their primary weapon of momentum is completely neutralized by tight spaces. You and your fellow hunters can safely approach from above the bone walls. You can look directly down upon the trapped beasts. You can dispatch them calmly and safely with heavy, stone-tipped spears. You have engineered a highly efficient slaughterhouse in the totally empty middle of the frozen wasteland. This incredible feat requires immense social coordination and deep trust. You absolutely cannot build a giant mammoth trap alone. You cannot drive a terrified herd alone. You must communicate constantly with your tribe. You must share a singular, vivid vision. You must plan days or even weeks in advance. You must deeply understand the seasonal migration routes of the herds perfectly. You must know exactly when they will arrive. You must know exactly what direction they will travel. This high level of abstract foresight is a defining characteristic of the complex human mind. You are projecting yourself deep into the distant future. You are imagining a physical reality that absolutely does not yet exist. You are then building it in the physical world with your own hands. You are manipulating reality to serve your survival. As the long, brutal ice age finally ended, the global climate shifted drastically. The giant mammoths slowly disappeared from the earth forever. The massive woolly rhinos vanished into history. But the incredible technology of the trap did not vanish with them. It evolved rapidly. It adapted seamlessly to brand new environments. You move forward in time to the endless, baking deserts of the Middle East. The landscape is completely different now. The freezing, icy plains are entirely replaced by scorching sand and sharp, black volcanic rock. The glaring sun beats down mercilessly upon the earth. But the core human drive to engineer the surrounding environment remains exactly the same. You look down from the sky at the flat desert floor. You see massive, strange geometric shapes permanently carved into the barren earth. These massive structures are known today as the desert kites. They are massive stone structures that look exactly like giant V-shapes from high above. Some of these continuous stone walls are literally miles long. They stretch incredibly far across the dusty horizon. They are built from low, carefully stacked stone walls. These seemingly endless walls gradually converge over miles into a tiny, narrow enclosure. Dr. Remy Crassard is an archaeologist who has extensively mapped and meticulously studied these mysterious structures across the harsh Arabian Peninsula. His extensive, detailed research shows that these massive traps were used to capture entire herds of fast-moving gazelles. The sheer geographic scale of these traps is absolutely staggering to comprehend. They represent a massive, generational investment of human time and intense physical labor. You and your tight-knit community would spend months continuously building these long walls. You would carry thousands of heavy stones under the burning sun. They were carefully and deliberately placed along known, ancient seasonal migration routes. You had to know exactly where the skittish animals would walk. When the time was finally right, you would wait in absolute, dead silence. The fast animals would enter the incredibly wide end of the massive funnel. It was miles across. They would not even realize they were being slowly and deliberately guided. The stone walls were just high enough to keep them moving constantly forward. They strongly preferred to walk along the wall rather than jump over it. You and the other skilled hunters would suddenly appear violently behind them. You would shout loudly. You would wave your arms wildly in the dry air. The panicked, terrified herd would run blindly forward. They would sprint directly into the narrow, invisible pit at the absolute end of the long kite. There was absolutely no escape from the trap. This is where the true, brilliant twist of human evolution reveals itself entirely to you. You often think of the ancient, primitive world as a place of constant, chaotic, bloody physical struggle. You imagine your distant ancestors fighting desperately for every single inch of survival. You picture brutal hand-to-hand combat with savage, hungry beasts. But the beautiful, calculated invention of the trap tells a completely different, much smarter story. True hunting was never about raw brute force. It was about creating highly efficient systems. It was about aggressively minimizing personal physical risk while maximizing the caloric reward. You were not fighting nature at all. You were automating it entirely. You look closely at your comfortable, modern life today. You absolutely do not chase down your food through the dark woods. You do not risk your life for a single meal. You rely entirely on massive, complex, invisible systems to bring vital resources directly to you. You build huge physical and digital funnels everywhere you go. You constantly engineer your immediate environment to make your daily life easier and far more predictable. You automate your finances. You automate your climate control. You automate your daily entertainment. This is absolutely not a modern, recent phenomenon. This deep, burning desire to structure and control the wild, chaotic world is the absolute oldest human instinct. The exact same complex mind that carefully built a massive corral out of heavy mammoth bones built the bright, modern grocery store you walked into yesterday. The exact same brain that stacked miles of rough stones in the baking desert now writes invisible code to funnel massive amounts of data. You are still endlessly building traps. You are still actively directing the massive flow of energy to sustain your fragile life. You are simply operating on a different landscape. You stand at the edge of the world. You feel the wind on your face. You deeply understand the immense power of your own mind. You look across the frozen steppe one last time, watching a mountain of muscle fall not to strength, but to the invisible weight of human foresight.